Welcome to What a Creep, the show with Margot Donohue and Sonia Mansfield, talking about creeps from the past to the present.
This is your quick guide to the biggest creeps, jerks, assholes, and losers, the best of the worst.
From two nice ladies who want the world to be a little less creepy.
Welcome back to What a Creep. We are the podcast that talk about creeps from the past to the present. I am Margot Donohue, and my cohort in creepitude, as always, is the amazing Sonia Mansfield. Hey, Sonia.
Hello, my friend.
Hello, my friend. Today, we are talking about a creepy incident. We are talking about a family with a lot of money and with more money, more problems. It's a big, messy story. We'll get into that in a second. But just to let you know, if you want to reach out to us with your suggestions for creeps and non-creeps, we always end the show with someone who's not a creep. That way you feel a little more elevated by the end of the episode. You don't feel completely hopeless. We have a basic Facebook page. That's where people go to, tisk us for using salty language. We use salty language in the show because we're goddamn adults.
Yeah, fucking deal with it.
We're very interactive in our Facebook group. So you type in What a Creep podcast group in order to join. You just have to basically promise not to be an asshole and pretty much let you in. But that's the best place to reach the both of us. We're both there all the time. We are on Twitter at CreepPod. That's dying a death. So whatever. Yeah. We're on Instagram and Threads and Blue Sky at What a Creep podcast. Yes. And we are on, my cat just rubbed up against my leg. She's being so cute. I know. We also have a basic old-timey email if that's how you want to reach us. It's whatacreeppodcast@gmail.com. And if you would like some stickers, send us your email and we will put a bunch of stickers in an envelope and send them to you wherever you are on the planet of Earth. Sonia,
it's true. She'll do it.
I'll do it. Dare me, man. Just freaking dare me. Sonia, tell them about the website, please.
You can go to whatacreeppodcast.com and it's everything you wanted to know about our show, but we're afraid to ask. There are links to all of our past episodes, and in each of those posts are our show notes. We source every single thing we do. We're not making this stuff up, and we want to give credit to the people that did the work. So if you're looking for a deeper dive on any of our creeps, that's a great place to start. We also have a link to our merch shop where you could get t-shirts and tote bags and face masks and all the good things, journals, whatever you want, with our logo on it and a couple of other little fun designs. There's also a link to our Substack, which is our free monthly newsletter that's all about, it's updates on creeps, hints about what's coming. I write a horoscope. It's fun. Sign up. And it's free. And there's a link to our Patreon page. You want to tell them about that, Margot?
Yes, Patreon. If you want to support the show financially, that would be amazing. We'd be really grateful. We use that money just for the basic shit that you need to put a podcast together, and also all those goddamn sources that we use.
We like to pay people.
We do like to pay people. So Patreon, we have our first 8 seasons on there. We put out 2 bonus episodes a month. And this year, as we did the last few years, if you signed up by a certain time, you will be getting your holiday card. Sonia got that shit done and taken care of.
Yes, I did.
All of you that signed up, thank you so much for that. And also, just want to say, if money is tight, I get it. It's the holidays. Layoff season. Whee!
'Tis the season. My work Slack exploded today, literally went away, and everybody freaked out and was like, "Oh my God, we're all being fired." That's not what happened. There was just an outage or whatever.
But that's exactly
Tis
when
the season.
Tis the season. So look, y'all, watch your pennies. We totally understand that. If you could just leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts or wherever they say to do, that would be amazing. And I want to say thank you to Karjeabos, Karjeabos, and then Bab001. Both of them give us 5 stars on iTunes. We completely appreciate that. You can also do it on Spotify, wherever you get it. That would be amazing. Or seriously, just tell a friend about the show. It helps us find our people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
We do.
Mm-hmm.
Sonia, this creep that we're talking about today, it's creepy history. It's a family history we're talking about the Getty family. They got a shitload of money. They couldn't
So
spend
much
it all.
money.
It's I didn't even realize like they own Getty Images of all things. Like they like it's on top of the oil, on top of all
Yes.
the properties that they have, and they're very, very philanthropic. Give a lot
True
of money
dat.
to museums, to shelters, to all kinds of things around the world. But when you have a whole lot of money, you can also have a whole lot of problems. I totally believe that addiction can run in the family, and when you have money and travel and some free time, and you have an addiction problem, those things can add up to some pretty fucked up stuff. So we want to talk about this family today. I want to say we could do a whole goddamn season, like 10 episodes, just the Getty family, just like the Getty curse or the Getty whatever. We're not going to do that. We're just giving you this big overlay, view from up high for a few of the John Gettys that we want to talk about today. We recommend you try other podcasts like Trashy Divorces, whom I'm sure have covered this topic as well. But we're going to focus on a particular event that happened in 1973 when John Paul Getty III was kidnapped in Italy. The kidnappers initially demanded ransom of $17 million. That's about $100 million in today's dollars. But the boy's grandfather, J. Paul Getty Sr., number one of the wealthiest men in the world at the time, refused to pay.
Damn.
Yes. The kidnappers then sent a lock of young Getty's hair, and this is the gruesome part, they severed his right ear and mailed it to the police to pressure the family.
How old was he again?
16. Eventually, J. Paul Getty agreed to pay a reduced amount, and his grandson was released after being captive for several months.
Damn.
This story inspired a feature film by Ridley Scott and a 10-part series featuring our favorite Hollywood comeback story, Brendan Fraser. This story has it all.
This story has everything.
Life Stefan. Miserable rich people, hippies, Italian mafioso types, strained family relationships, trigger warning, addiction, and kidnapping. These are just some of the sources. They're all in your show notes, y'all. Here we go. All That's Interesting, The Daily Beast, Town and Country, New York Post, New York Times, Vanity Fair, People Magazine, All the Money in the World, directed by Ridley Scott. It's not good. Painfully Rich by John Pearson. Not good.
That bums me out. I'm on a Ridley Scott kick.
Check it out. You might like it more. I think we'll talk about that in a second.
Okay.
J. Paul Getty, the Wikipedia, of course, The Gentleman's Journal, NPR, Time, the show Trust that is on Hulu/FX, and a book that I really liked called Growing Up Getty, the story of America's most unconventional dynasty. These people are still around, y'all. They're still kicking it, as the kids say. We'll start with J. Paul Getty, and then we'll go to
Sorry, do they? They might still. Can I kick it? They might.
Yes, I can. Can you kick it? Yes, you can. John Paul Getty was born December 15th, 1892, Minneapolis, Minnesota, only child. His family was of that Irish, Scottish stock, very pious. They watched their pennies. They were, right? I'll just go to the big things. He was given his wealth. He was given a few $1,000s when he was young to start a business. He went to Oklahoma and found oil, and he started Getty Oil. That's where he started his big business.
And then the whole family moved to Beverly Hills.
That's not what he wanted. In 1957, Fortune magazine named him the wealthiest living American. When he went to, he was worth $1.2 billion then. That's about $8 billion in today's money.
Damn.
That's like a shitload of money, y'all. He was worth over $6 billion when he died, which is $24 billion. Like that's just, okay. He's known for being very frugal. He's known for fucking like crazy. This guy was DTF, like hard on all the time.
All right.
He could not stop himself. Very cheap. He liked to be fit, didn't have really close relationships with people, except people with pussies.
He didn't have emotional closeness.
No, to anybody. He also really loved art and architecture, had a deep appreciation for it. He loved England. He was an Anglophile. He moved to England as soon as he could. He could afford a place. He's donated, so many of his artworks have been donated around the world. The Getty Museum in Los Angeles is one of the best in the world. But he was something of a notorious womanizer, married 5 times.
Damn.
Some of them he knew when they were like 14 and then eventually married them.
Ew.
Yeah. These things happen. He had John Paul Getty Jr. from Anne Rourke. He had a few wives before he got to Anne. Anne's number 4. He did have a son, George, from his first marriage. He married 17-year-old Ashby. Then he married Adolphine. Then he married Anne Rourke. And then he married a woman, Louise Dudley Teddy Lynch. He had children with all these people, all these women. But like I said, he didn't have a very close relationship with all of them. J. Paul Getty Jr. and George Peter Getty, kind of the closest that he was to all of them. They were born in 32 and 33, respectively. Okay. And Louise had a son named Timothy, and he was born in 1946, and he was very sickly. He had a brain tumor, and it actually made him go blind. It's the 1950s. What do you do when you have a kid and you've got money? What do? You take him to the doctor. You go to as many specialists as you can. He would get on her case for going to too many doctors because he kind of just thought the kid was a lost cause. The boy dies at the age of 12.
Oh.
He's living in England by then. Doesn't go to the funeral.
It's so shitty. Like, he's like so fucking cheap.
He had a place in England that he was building. He actually famously put a pay telephone in there. So when people would come to visit, because he was tired of all these long distance calls.
Oh my God, what a fucking prick. So fucking cheap, but so generous with his seed.
Yes.
And then we'll put a fucking pay telephone. Can I use your phone for a second? Yeah, the pay phone's down the hall.
Do you have a stack of quarters? There you go. Or whatever they use in England. I know. His secretary claimed that he did his own laundry by hand or had his laundry done by hand because he didn't want to pay for his clothes to be laundered. He would reuse stationery. If you would send him a note, he would take that same letter and write in the margins and send it back to you. Hoarded manila envelopes, rubber bands, just any office supplies. His swing-line stapler.
I'm not rich.
No.
I would absolutely, if I had a little bit more money, I would totally pay someone to do my laundry. But I am someone who, I do have like a doorknob that has rubber bands all over it. Maybe I'm like a Getty. I'm practically a Getty is what I'm saying.
He didn't like to pay for anything if he didn't have to.
Yes.
So he went one time, he was at a dog show in London and he walked in with some friends. It was a group of people and he was going to pay for them to go in. And then he realized, if I wait 10 minutes, it's going to be half price. So he said, let's go for a walk. So they had a walk for 10 minutes. Like this, and it's like a shilling. It's nothing. But he was, he had a place, Sutton Place, that's where he got his reputation as a miser, for having all of those telephones. A cheap guy. He famously said, I can't say no to a woman and I can't say yes to a man. He loved business. He worked 16 to 18 hours a day. He expected, obviously the most from everybody, including his sons, that he doesn't pay attention to. And the mothers, their mothers who he's cheating on. Like, he doesn't see how all of this goes together. He's not much of a drinker. He doesn't like drugs. But his sons do.
It's expensive.
It costs money. Right, exactly.
Drugs and booze, that shit's expensive. How dare you drink the water? Not my water. That's for me. You could go buy some water.
J. Paul Getty Jr., his first, that son, He marries a woman named Gail in the early 60s, and they have a few kids, and he's sensible. His sons are all kind of wild when it comes to school. They all get kicked out of schools, and the boys especially. The girls tend to mind their business. He marries Gail, and then he asks to be transferred to Italy so that they could raise their family there, and he'll work on the Italian side of the business. That's like what he wanted to do. And it's like 1963. What happens in the 60s in Rome? It goes crazy, like the rest of the 60s around the world. It's a cosmopolitan, but ciao, people are going around on little Jettas and shit like that.
Yeah, on their little Vespas.
Little
Ciao,
Vespas.
baby.
Yeah, there you go. Ciao, ciao. He just takes to it. He's the drinking and the drugs and all that stuff. And he breaks up with Gail, and he takes up with a woman named Talitha Pole. And she is one of the most beautiful women I've ever seen in my life. She is considered a fashion icon. She's much younger than him. They get married pretty quickly, and she's like the big love of his life. They're living in Rome, and he has Gail there, and he's with Talitha, and they're going back and forth between London and here, and partying. Talitha tries to go. She is a fashion icon. There's all these pictures of her in Marrakesh. It's that boho chic thing. Very natural beauty. All the rock stars have a crush on her. Like, everyone's into this chick. Talitha Pole. But she's developed a heroin problem. And they break up because she wants to stop partying and he doesn't want to stop partying. And then they come back together. So this is in the early of 71. And unfortunately, they get back together and she dies of a drug overdose.
That's sad.
Which is very sad. So he then has their kid to raise, plus these other kids, and he's already been kind of a fuck up with his dad. He's trying to figure it out, like what his place is in the world, what he wants to do. The other son, George, a couple of years later, George is married. George tried working for his father, and he's kind of this Eeyore person, like, I'm a failure. Dad doesn't
Thanks for noticing.
Oh, Mr. Cellophane. Like, he's just Mr. No one pays attention to him. Like, they're all good looking, by the way. The Gettys are good looking people. Like, they all can get some tail. So George is in Los Angeles. Like, he did work for his father for a while, but he was just such a fuck up that his dad was kind of like pushing him to the side. He gets into an argument with his wife. This is in early of 1973. He's shooting guns in the air. They're having a party, a pool party, acting the fool. And then he gets really upset and he swallowed a bunch of pills. And he took a barbecue fork and started stabbing himself in the stomach with it. He stabbed himself with a barbecue fork. Like those.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
He's a Getty son. He's the first son. And people are like, we can't take him to the hospital here.
That's expensive.
It's expensive. It'll get all over the news. So they take him to a more private hospital, but he winds up dying over there because they didn't take care of it right away. So he's dead. So the son, like, he's lost two sons at this point. The senior, I mean. Gail is trying to raise her kids from Junior, and one of them is the third, Paul, J. Paul Getty. And Paul is like a really handsome kid, a handful. He's a redhead. He's really slim. He's got like bushy big hair, and he's like 60s rock star skinny. And he's just a party kid, and he goes to school in Rome, and then he gets sent to school all over Europe, and he gets kicked out, and he comes home, and he just wants to be a bohemian. He just wants to be an artist. He doesn't give a shit about school. Gail's trying to relate to him. That's her oldest. That's her, And so
it's your kid.
It's your kid. So she's giving him some space, and she's like, all right, maybe he's figuring himself out in Rome. So he's 16 years old. It's July, and then one night, all this shit goes to hell.
This episode is brought to you by Our Weird World. Every week, I, John Henson, dive into weird, crazy, and forgotten stories from the history books that you have probably never heard before. I try to put some humor into it, or maybe I just come off sounding like a dick. That's really up for you to decide. But join me every Monday. Subscribe everywhere that you get your podcasts.
July 10th, 1973, John Paul Getty the third, 16 years old, by the way. Little party animal. He's partying in the middle of Rome, ciao, with his friends. Middle of the night, and he gets abducted. His mom doesn't hear from him for a couple of days.
Okay.
And when she does, it's somebody calling her and saying, ciao, you must give us 17 a minute. I'm not going to give you guys my bad Italian accents. But they say to her, hey, we've got your son. We're kidnappers. You need to give us $17 million. Once again, that's the equivalent of like $112 million in 2022 for his safe return. There were all kinds of kidnappings happening at the time. There were also hijackings happening at the time. The 70s are crazy.
Yeah. When did Patty Hearst
75?
happen? Okay.
So those are all these things that are like, it's just a crazy, wild time. There's also all the protests on campuses around the world, inflation starting to happen. There's all, leftover, the hangover of the 60s, the 70s kind of like finding its identity.
Yes.
So they just think the Italian cops that she's seen as a lone single woman with this child that gets taken from her. And they look at her and they think, he's this brat. He's just looking for attention. He's getting high with a bunch of people, and they're just trying to snooker, his grandfather out of some money. And she's saying, no, this is really what's going on. My son has been kidnapped, and I'm really terrified for him. And it takes a while for people to take her seriously.
That sucks.
It's the misogyny of the time.
How fucking terrible.
They're just talking down to her, and she's just trying to get her shit together. And I want to make this clear. The kidnappers are the creeps in this episode, by the way.
Yes.
I understand I'm talking about the thriftiness of the grandfather, and yeah, he's a cheap asshole, but he didn't do this to his grandson. I mean, this is okay. And how do you deal with terrorists and kidnappers? It's a very tricky thing.
Yeah, of course.
His father, John Paul Getty II Jr., is kind of a mess left over from his wife dying a couple of years before. He sort of like kind of works. He's working, but he's not made of the stuff that his father's made of. And his father is like really kind of disgusted. He's disgusted that his grandson's just out in the middle of the night in Rome and getting picked up for kidnapping. He's disgusted because his son let that happen. He's disgusted at Gail for like letting it happen. He's like just mad, and he doesn't want to give up any money. And so the press contacts him. And finally, the word starts to get out that he's being he's kidnapped until December. This is July.
That's a really long. I can't even imagine how scared his mother must have been that whole time. Well, and him, obviously, but like when like something bad is happening and you're telling people and they're like blowing you off.
It's 70s. He's probably a runaway. There's all those cases of people that like disappeared and people said, they're just, they just took off. It was easier to just take off back then. And he's being beaten by these guys, put a hood over his head, and they move to different locations all the time. There's about 9 of them, they think. They try to make sure he never really sees them. They feed him occasionally, but the family is coming back like, nah, we're not paying. And the reasoning is that Senior says, I have 13 other grandchildren. If I pay this, I'm going to have to pay out 13 times.
It's so fucked up.
It looks weak to him. He wants a negotiation. What does that remind you of?
Everything's a negotiation.
So eventually it gets agreed upon, and there's a lot of back and forth between, because there's also an artistic community that really liked Paul and kind of took him in. He's 16. He was really into music and art and fashion and movies and all that. He knew Warhol. I mean, he was a cool kid.
Yeah. And
they're trying to be an interloper, like to help out, in between.
Right. Meanwhile, Grandpa's like, I have a coupon for 50% off ransom.
Sad enough, in November, months later, November, there was a 2-week strike. The Italian post office. So and trust me, I've mailed things from Italy before. It takes forever anyway. Like I cannot imagine during a strike how they get anything done. But they sent a letter through the post office to the police and said it had an ear, and had some hair, red hair. They said, this is Paul's ear. If we don't get some money within 10 days, then the other year will arrive. In other words, he will arrive in little bits.
That's awful.
Finally, and then they're like, do we take a picture of this and put it in the press? Because do we make a big deal out of this, or what are we going to do? Right. Anyway, J. Paul Getty's like, fine. Senior says, fine, we'll pay it. I won't pay more than $2.2 million, because that's as much as he could make as a tax write-off for this. The rest of the money he lent to his son, J. Paul Getty Jr., number 2, and charged him 4% interest.
Jesus Christ. What a prick. Well, and the son he's damaged goods, right? He's missing an ear. I'm not paying full price.
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
Forget it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Blech.
Yeah,
Gee.
it's pretty gross. So he's an asshole, like for sure. Paul is then returned to his family, missing the ear.
So awful.
And his mother is grateful that he's home. His dad is working hard for his father to pay off this fucking loan that I'm sure they take out of the paycheck every week over his son. So he goes within a year. He's 17 at this point. He had his birthday while he was being kidnapped. And he did have a girlfriend before he left, and he hooks up with her, and they get married very quickly. Before he's even 18, I think. And their first son is Balthazar, who's the actor Balthazar Getty.
Yes.
And they're pretty happy, for a while. He did break the law, though, for the Gettys also. John Paul Getty Sr. had a rule that you couldn't get married until you were 22. You had to wait till you were 22, and then you could attach yourself to a trust. Because he didn't want the daughters getting pregnant and getting married at 15, 16 or whatever. Okay. He's a little bit of a control freak.
Yeah, and there's some sort of, price discount you get when you're over 22, I'm sure.
He dies in 1976, J. Paul Getty Sr. He's in his 80s. Whatever. His dick got around. He lived a full life.
I'm sure he figured it out, and that was the most affordable time to go.
He was very, very particular in the end. He lived alone. He had a bunch of women on call, a lot of booty calls, and he loved to update his will. I'll give this one $500. I'll give that one nothing. I'll give it. He gave a lot of money to charity and created like I said, the most beautiful museums you'll ever see. There is this amazing philanthropic arm to the family. Let's say that. But the sons definitely paid the price for the trauma. And once again, the drugs and the alcohol run in the family. Paul got married, like I said, had kids, and he really tried to get it together. But he was in so much shock and trauma from the kidnapping. He didn't have great skills. He was addicted to drugs and alcohol. Everybody he knew drank and did drugs. It's very hard to start over a life and being sober. And he had so many issues that he had a stroke in 1981. Then less than 10 years after this all happened. And he was very young, and he was basically in a wheelchair. Lost a lot of his speech, He was partially paralyzed. He was partially blind.
That is really sad.
He dies in February 5th of 2011 at the age of 54.
That is young.
Which is young. And his mom was taking care of him. So there was money left aside, a house, and it basically was a really nice hospital, a private hospital that he lived in. And his mother, Gail, took care of him right to the end, because that's what moms do.
Yeah.
The father dies in 2003. Junior, that's the second one. He eventually gets it together. He's much more of the person that really got into conservation and philanthropic adventures and things like that.
Okay.
He gave a lot of money away to charities, and he sort of encouraged that. So that's good.
Yeah.
Balthazar is married, has been married for over 20 years. He has 4 or 5 kids with his wife.
Ooh.
They had a little bit, they were separated for a couple of years, but they've worked it out. And the Getty family is still one of the wealthiest families there. there's a lot of other people who have died, by the way, over the years, and people who've had alcohol issues, drug issues. That's like for another episode.
Mm-hmm.
That's our story for today. The kidnapping of grandson John Paul Getty III.
Good job, my friend. So they never caught these people.
Sorry. Yes, they did. 2 of them spent a couple of years in jail, but the rest of them, nothing. And because
they should have got way more time than that.
They didn't take it seriously. Like, even he had his fucking ear cut off, and they still didn't. Look, if there's a certain amount of the mob was involved in part of this. I mean, there's a handshake and a deal done in the back, that kind of thing. And Paul said that they like kept his eyes covered, and he was in the shadows, or they put a tarp over his head and drove him around. He was disoriented. He had no idea. It's not like he could mess you up. Yeah. So it was. Yeah, it's really sad. It completely messes him up. I mean, and then it's just like it goes down. The trauma goes down to the next generation, the next generation. And there's some really sad things about it. And I get it. It's easy to say John Paul Getty Sr. is an asshole. He is a creep. He's an asshole, but he didn't kidnap the grandson.
Yes,
I mean,
exactly.
He was a cheap bastard.
Yeah, that's fun to make fun of.
And most of the ransom money was never recovered, which is also part of like what's really kind of curious about this all. And if you're curious about the movie, Mark Wahlberg, who we did an episode on recently, is a major character in this movie. I'll say it. He stinks on ice. He is not good. Michelle Williams is working her ass off. Christopher Plummer doing a great job. And the kid who played him in the movie is great. Mark Wahlberg is, I think Brendan Fraser has that part in the Trust show on FX, which I saw. I just don't think it needed to be 10 episodes. I kind of like bounced around. I'm like, yeah.
I think Mark Wahlberg is a certain kind of actor. He needs to play a certain kind of part, and this doesn't sound like the kind of part for him. I don't know a better way to put it, but he's not a chameleon actor, you know? Like, you're very aware it's Mark Wahlberg.
He runs through all the emotions, Sonia, from A to B.
I will watch it eventually because, again, like I'm gonna start watching a bunch of Ridley Scott movies, but
it's an interesting movie.
Yeah,
it's just not a great Ridley Scott movie.
Yeah.
It could have been so much better. I mean, if they could take out Kevin Spacey to put Christopher Plummer in this thing, how can that not take out Mark Wahlberg? I mean, seriously.
There you go. You fixed it. Do you want to hear about someone who's not a creep?
Yes, please.
Okay. I found us another Getty that I thought would be fun to talk about.
Getty Lee?
Do you know who Estelle Getty is?
Yes, I know Estelle Getty.
So Estelle Getty, y'all, played Sophia on The Golden Girls. She was the youngest in the cast, but played the oldest. And she had all the best lines. So if you've never seen Golden Girls, it's rerunning on Lifetime all the time, and you should go watch it because it's actually really, really fucking funny. It ran from 85 to 92. And she was nominated for an Emmy like every year that she was on the show. She won one time.
Not Sicily, 1921.
My favorite, like Blanche is like, my life is an open book. And Sophia goes, more like an open blouse. When she finally made it on The Golden Girls, she said, like, after 50 years in the business, I'm finally an overnight success. It turned out that she had been in the theater and acting like her entire life until she like hit it big with The Golden Girls. So we're going to back up a little, and you'll see why I picked her as the not a creep. It's not just because she's hilarious on The Golden Girls. So Estelle Schur, that was her name. She had no middle name, was born in Manhattan, July 25th, 1923. She was the daughter of immigrants from Poland. Her father had a glass business, and they lived like next door to the glass business. It was taken over by this man named Arthur Gettelman, and that's where she got Getty, because she married him in 1947.
Oh.
And all through like high school, she did secretarial work. and then she would take like small theater roles as she could. Even after she got married, she had 2 boys, and she would continue to like work like when she could. So it was like she would take the kids to school, make their lunches, go to auditions during the day, like put the kids to bed, and then like perform at night.
Wow.
Like she worked all the time. So in 1978, she goes and she sees The International Stud, which is the first installment of what became known as the Torch Song Trilogy by Harvey Fierstein. Fierstein. She went backstage. She introduces herself to him, and they became friends. And then in '84, like she goes and she sees him again, and she's like, "You're such a hotshot playwright now. Why don't you write a part with a mother in it, and I'll play her?" And then he writes a play called Widows and Children First. I guess that's the concluding segment of the trilogy. And after that, like she started to become more well known. And then she gets like the performance of Cher's mother in Mask.
Such a good movie.
Yes. And she's on the road, like performing the play. And that's when she auditions for Golden Girls and she gets it. And her husband actually didn't want to leave New York. So like she lived in LA and he lived in New York. They stayed together the whole time. And that show ran for years. But the reason I picked her, because I didn't know this about her, she had a lot of friends in the LGBTQ plus community, and she was heavily involved in HIV and AIDS activism.
Aww.
And she used to perform at all the benefits and like go to all the benefits, raise money for them, donate, all these things. One of her nephew, Stephen, actually was diagnosed with AIDS, and like she took him in and like hospice for him until he passed away. One of her Torch Song Trilogy co-stars, Court Miller, also had AIDS, and she like took care of him too. She worked to open a hospice center in Greensboro, North Carolina, which is her nephew's hometown. It's still there, by the way, as of 2023. So it's still a thing. And she said that like, I'm here, she would go and do these like parties. And she said, this is my most important cause. Like she dedicated a lot of money and free time to that. She died in 2008, just 3 days before her 85th birthday. She had something called Lewy body dementia, which had been misdiagnosed like multiple times. Like at one point they thought she had Parkinson's disease, and she started losing her mind, her scent, things like that. But eventually she passed away. Her husband died a couple years before that. So that's our non-creep, Estelle Getty.
Oh, Sonia.
I didn't know that she did all of that. Yes. She's so good on that show. I think you can watch the reruns on Hulu. Like, I was watching some a couple months ago, and I was cracking up. That show is still funny as shit.
Solid show.
Yep.
All right, that's our episode today. And if you like the sound of our voices, we also love to talk about movies on our other show, Dorking Out. We dork out about films from the past to the present. We are currently dorking out about Dragnet, or did we recently have
JFK?
JFK. See, we go all over the place with these things.
We're all over it. Dragnet, JFK. What's the difference? About 2 hours.
What are we covering next, Sonia?
This was a request. We've been getting this one for a while. It is finally streaming. We are watching Sweet November with Keanu Reeves and Charlize Theron. I have never seen this movie. Just by the summary I've read, not the summary, because I don't want to spoil it for myself, even though I have a pretty good idea how it ends.
If you look at the trailer, you have an idea.
Yeah, I know I'm going to have thoughts and feelings about this one.
It's based, the original came out in 1968. It's Sandy Denny, and I forget who else, but
Yeah.
well, these are like the two best looking people on the planet. Like, it's going to be at least good eye candy.
Yes, absolutely. I love both of these people. So, and it's filmed in San Francisco. So there's a lot of things about it that I'll be like, that's great. And then the story will happen.
If you want to send us suggestions, once again, for creeps and non-creeps, all those places I mentioned at the top of the show, we'd love it when you use the Annie Potts gift. We got one from Ghostbusters, or just be creative and use something on your own. Our email, once again, is whatacreeppodcast@gmail.com. And Sonia, where can they find you?
You can find me at thesoniashow.com and The Sonia Show on all your social media preferences, Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram, X, TikTok. I'm everywhere. Margot, where can they find you?
You can find me at Brooklyn Margot on TikTok, on Threads, on Blue Sky, on my site is Brooklyn Fit Chick. I'm at Brooklyn Fit Chick on X and Instagram. And I think that's it. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back soon with a new episode. In the meantime, be kind, be safe, pay your ransoms. Don't be a creep.
Be creep. Thank you for listening to us talk about creeps. You can follow us at What a Creep Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
But don't follow us too closely.
You can email us your creepy stories at whatacreeppodcast@gmail.com.
But please keep your dick pics to yourself.